Cole Whitaker stared at the feed long after the screen should have gone black. No one else noticed what happened, because no one else saw it. They couldn't have, because if they had, they wouldn't still be breathing like everything was normal. Cole was the last man in the monitoring bay that night, alone, watching the classified recon footage from the Martian dig site that NASA, DARPA, and the Department of Defense had all quietly scrubbed from existence. He was supposed to archive the data, label it inconclusive geological anomalies, and erase the backups. But at 2:07 a.m., the armor moved. Not the crew, not the sand, not the wind-carved ruins of the alien vaults. The armor, suspended. Vacuum, untouched for centuries, fused to the bones of a species that died before Earth grew its first forest, twitched its head toward the camera. It looked right at him, not at the drone. At him, through time, through glass, through layers of encryption and plausible deniability. And in that precise moment, Cole realized something horrifying and beautiful. It rejected them all. Not a single species in 7 galaxies could wear it. It burned through blood, screamed inside minds, crushed spines and evaporated memory. It chose no one. Until last month when the silence broke. And the last message from the Mars team, what little the satellites captured before everything went dark, wasn't words. It was a name, one name, spoken not in English or code, but in infant speech. A baby girl, born in Milwaukee just days before the mission vanished, spoke it in her crib on livestream while her mother read a bedtime book off camera. She had never been told that name. It was never written down. And yet, she whispered it, clear as a bell. Cole. That's when the sensors in Cole's apartment started picking up unregistered static between 3:06 and 3:09 a.m. every night. Not EM radiation, not Wi-Fi bleed. Something else. Something remembering. Its way back through the dark. He thought it was a power surge at first, a grounding issue, until the static began forming shapes, and a voice, low, fragmented, impossibly familiar, broke through the signal last night. It wasn't asking for help. It wasn't warning him. It was inviting him. You're not watching this by accident. You're not the kind of person who believes everything they're told. And now that you've seen it, felt it in your chest, like a pressure drop before a storm, you have to ask yourself one question, the one no one else dared speak, not even in whispered thoughts under soundproof ceilings. What kind of armor rejects the universe, but waits for one species to evolve? Cole hasn't been seen in 31 hours. But earlier today, his phone powered on for exactly 6 minutes from an untraceable location and transmitted one single image before self-destructing its hardware. It's a photo of Earth, taken from low lunar orbit. But the clouds over Kansas are wrong. They aren't clouds. They're forming letters, and they spell out something that should never exist in the sky. Your name. Cole's phone flickered once, twice, then blacked out, like a heartbeat skipping swallowed whole. The image it sent didn't just feel like a message. It was a riddle wrapped in static, an encrypted scream etched across a quiet sky. That night, the weight in his chest hadn't lifted. Instead, it grew heavier, squeezing air from his lungs, stealing the warmth from his blood, until even breathing felt like admitting defeat. Days passed, or maybe it was hours. Time began to bend and warp around him, fragments blurring and overlapping like a faded photograph left in the rain. His apartment, once a safe haven, now held the shadows of 1,000 unspoken secrets. Flickering lights, the distant hum of electronics pulsating just beyond hearing, and that persistent static creeping through the walls like a virus. The voice came back, not clear this time, just whispers, half words, like a breath drawn through cracked glass, fragments of something familiar but never fully grasped. The line between his memories and dreams started to fray. He couldn't recall how long ago it was that he'd last slept. Sometimes he'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart hammering, with a name on his tongue he couldn't place, a name no one had said aloud. His mind felt invaded, like a room rifled through by unseen hands. Small details rearranged, like an old photo album with pictures subtly altered. His journal was missing entries. Recordings from his phone appeared and disappeared without explanation, fragments of conversations he swore never happened. Then she appeared, Lena Harper. A name he had no recollection of ever hearing before she showed up on his doorstep in the cold early morning light, eyes heavy with something like exhaustion or grief, maybe both. She wasn't on any of the rosters, no record of her anywhere near the mission or the agencies involved, but she knew him. Or at least, she claimed to. Her voice was soft but urgent, like she was holding back a storm. She said she was there to help, to protect him from whatever was coming through the static, from the armor, from the darkness beyond human sight. But every word she spoke twisted back into questions. Every reassurance felt like a veiled threat. "Cole," she said once, "they don't want you to remember who you really are. The armor isn't just a relic, it's a key. But to what? That's what they're hiding." Her eyes flickered with a desperation so raw it clawed at him, but he wanted to trust her and yet couldn't. Because when he asked her about the baby on the live stream, the name whispered from the crib. She shook her head and said, "That never happened. You dreamed it. It's the real mystery they don't want you to find, the truth behind what no one tells you." At times he swore she was slipping in and out of coherence, her stories collapsing under the weight of contradictions. She spoke of government cover-ups and ancient cosmic battles, but also of his childhood, memories that didn't line up with his own. The house he grew up in, the friends he claimed to have had, things she described in detail as if she lived inside them. Yet when he pressed her for proof, she only smiled. That's the point. What they don't want you to remember isn't out there, Cole. It's inside. The nights were worst. When the static came, it wasn't just sound but sensation. A creeping cold, a flicker in peripheral vision, shadows bending unnaturally close. Once, he heard his own voice arguing back at him from a hidden recorder he found under the floorboards. His voice, but the words weren't his. Pleas for forgiveness, cryptic warnings to run before it finds you. He smashed the device, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave. If anything, it grew stronger, like a quiet hunger waiting patiently to pounce. Lena claimed the armor was a living enigma, rejecting everything alien because it was waiting for one species capable of something beyond survival. Something no one else understood, not even Cole. But what if that was a lie? What if the armor was just a mirror reflecting what he refused to face? What if the whispers in the static, the missing memories, the vanishing mission, they weren't signs of alien interference but fragments of a fractured mind unraveling under pressure? He didn't know who was real anymore. Her, the baby, the armor, or himself. And then the letters in the sky came back. Not on the phone this time, not through static or fleeting images, but scrawled across his own window one rainy morning, written in the condensation. Remember. No one else saw it. No one else could. But Cole felt it, the slow drip of a truth dissolving into madness, and the terrifying promise that what they don't want you to remember is only the beginning. Because sometimes the real unsolved mystery isn't what happened to the mission, or the armor that rejected every alien. It's what's left behind in the silence, the forgotten, the erased, the shadow lurking just behind your own eyes. And Cole Whitaker was starting to wonder if he'd ever been there at all. Cole sat alone in the dim glow of his apartment, fingers trembling as he held the battered flash drive he'd found buried deep in a false panel beneath his old desk. It was a relic, forgotten but preserved, something he hadn't known he'd been searching for until now. The drive promised answers, or at least a trail leading beyond the ever-thickening fog clouding his mind. The static that haunted him night after night seemed to pause when he touched it, as if the silence itself had been waiting for him to find this key. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, a brittle thread of hope wove through his fractured thoughts. The mystery might finally be unraveling. He connected the drive, heart hammering in sync with the old machine's startup hum. The files were encrypted, layers thick as fortress walls. But Cole's past job with data archives wasn't just a fated skill. It was a weapon. Slowly, painstakingly, he peeled back the layers. Fragments of classified audio logs, images, and transcripts revealing pieces of the mission he'd never been allowed to see. The voices, once a jumbled nightmare, began to line up into a narrative. The armor wasn't just an alien relic, it was a prison. A vessel designed to contain something ancient, something dangerous enough to shatter civilizations, something that didn't just reject all foreign hosts but killed them when they tried to wield its power, and it was waiting for a specific human to awaken it, someone whose DNA held a dormant code, a key to unlock what had been buried for eons. Cole's breath caught as he listened to the last audio clip, a trembling voice, barely audible beneath. Layers of interference whispering the name he'd heard from the baby's crib, Cole Whitaker. The realization struck him like a tidal wave crashing over a fragile boat. This wasn't coincidence. He wasn't a bystander. He was the epicenter. The files painted a terrifying picture. The original mission was a cover-up, the real goal to retrieve the armor and test its bond with Cole's genetic lineage. His disappearance was orchestrated, a smokescreen to protect the truth from leaking. The static, the voices, Lena, all threads woven to guard secrets that could unravel the fabric of human understanding. For a moment, it felt like he was standing on the edge of revelation, about to step through a door that would explain every lingering doubt, every fractured memory, every whisper in the static. The hidden truth was finally within reach. He was not crazy, they lied to him. The puzzle pieces were clicking into place. But then, something inside the files made his blood run cold. A distorted video surfaced, flickering and unstable, showing a younger version of himself, much younger, standing in a sterile white room. His eyes were vacant, unseeing, as if caught in a trance. A faceless figure moved behind him, murmuring words he couldn't hear, but the words were not meant for him. They were for someone else. The scene cut to black, replaced by a single phrase scrawled in shaky handwriting across the screen. Memory glitch detected. Cole's hands shook violently. He tried to recall any event from his childhood that matched the sterile room, the vacant stare, the faceless presence. But his mind rebelled. Shutters slammed down over the memories, leaving only fragments. A hospital bed, a strange hum, the scent of antiseptic and a chilling sense of being watched. The line between then and now blurred. The armor, the mission, the static, were they all echoes of something older, something buried deep in his mind? Had this key always been a trap? Had he been manipulated by forces lurking not in outer space, but inside his own history, and then, as if the universe itself was mocking his fragile grip on reality, the lights in his apartment flickered once more. The static surged into a deafening roar, drowning out all thought. In that overwhelming white noise, a shape took form. Silent, watching, patient. Not Lena, not the armor, but something far older, far darker. A presence that had observed every step, every fracture, every forgotten scar. It was not a visitor. It was a shadow stitched into the very fabric of Cole's existence. His phone buzzed, suddenly breaking the chaos. A single message appeared on the cracked screen. Look closer. Shaking, Cole scrolled back through every file, every whisper, every moment. And then it hit him. The baby's name, the voices, Lena's warnings, even the mission itself. It wasn't the beginning of the story. It was a carefully crafted distraction. The real mystery was not what the armor rejected, but what had been accepted long ago. The true secret hidden in plain sight, camouflaged by layers of lies and selective memories. He realized then that the entire narrative was a loop, one designed to keep him searching for answers outside himself, while the true force watched from within, waiting for him to unravel the wrong thread first. The quiet dread that settled in his chest was no longer just fear. It was understanding. The mystery uncovered was not a resolution but a trap. And somewhere, deep beneath the layers of what he thought he knew, Something was waiting to rewrite everything he believed. Cole blinked, staring back at the screen. The text, "Look closer," burning into his vision. The room fell silent, except for the faint, haunting echo of his own name, whispered just beyond comprehension. And with that, the story, the real story, began again. The realization that Cole was not alone came slowly, almost imperceptibly, as if it were whispered through. A cracked radio signal too faint to catch at first, then growing louder, impossible to ignore. For weeks he had felt isolated, the lone keeper of a fractured truth that bent and twisted beyond comprehension. But the shadows that clung to his thoughts began to shimmer with others like him, scattered across the country, connected by the invisible threads of a shared waking nightmare. It wasn't just him. It was a network of lost souls trapped inside a web of silence, each caught in their own looping echoes of forgotten memories and suppressed realities. One night, as the static bled into the corners of his vision, Cole's phone buzzed with a message unlike any before. A single cryptic symbol, a twisting spiral etched in black on a flickering white screen. No sender, no context. It was a symbol he had seen before, fleetingly, in a dream, in a fragment of one of Lena's recordings, in the graffiti scrawled on the abandoned walls of the warehouse he'd stumbled into weeks earlier. The spiral wasn't just a symbol. It was a key, a marker, a secret code designed to reach those who could decipher its meaning. The message was clear. You are not alone. That night, Cole dreamed of a dimly lit room lined with flickering monitors, each displaying a face, a mosaic of people whose eyes reflected the same haunted questions and fractured memories. He could not place them, yet their eyes were familiar, as if he had stared into their souls before. And in the center of that room sat a figure shrouded in shadow, whose voice was a low murmur threading through the dream's fragile fabric. You were right all along. They tried to bury the truth, but it bleeds through the cracks. He awoke gasping, heart pounding with a mixture of terror and strange relief, only to find another message waiting in his inbox, this time a short video clip, grainy and distorted, labeled simply, "Found footage from 20 years ago." The footage showed a group of people, their faces obscured but their voices urgent, speaking in hushed tones about experiments that had never been declassified, about what the government never released. Their words were fragmented, but the meaning was unmistakable. There was a force, a presence far beyond human understanding, manipulating not just technology or biology, but memory itself, rewriting history to suit its inscrutable purposes. Cole's hands shook as he replayed the footage, the faces blurring in and out of focus, merging with images from his own fragmented recollections. There was a pattern here, a rhythm to the chaos, a deeper game that used identity as a weapon, memory as a battlefield. The armor, the mission, the static, it was all part of a grand design to fracture perception, to control the narrative of reality from within. But control was an illusion. The watchers, the hidden puppeteers, were not invincible. They made mistakes. They left traces for those who dared to look closely. Amidst this gathering storm of whispered secrets and half-remembered truths, a new voice emerged, not through a message or a dream, but through a sudden, startling encounter. A woman named Mira. She appeared without warning, stepping out of the shadows of a coffee shop where Cole had sought refuge from his spiraling thoughts. Her eyes were sharp, her expression unreadable, as if she carried the weight of truths too dangerous to speak aloud. She claimed to have been watching him, and others like him, for months. Unlike Lena, whose motives remained tangled and elusive, Mira spoke with a cold clarity, a directness that unsettled Cole to his core. "You think you're chasing ghosts?" she said, voice low and deliberate. "But the real question isn't what they've hidden, it's why they want you to find it. Every memory you've lost, every whisper in the static, it's part of a bigger puzzle. You're not just pieces on a board. You're the board itself." Her words hung heavy in the stale air, dense with implications that rippled through Cole's mind like a stone dropped in still water. Identity wasn't fixed. It was malleable, fluid, a construct constantly rewritten by forces beyond comprehension. Mira spoke of a presence, a silent observer woven into the fabric of their lives, watching from the margins of consciousness, always just out of reach, but never truly gone. It was not an entity they could name, not a villain they could face head-on. It was a shadow of control, a creeping influence that bent reality and memory to its will, erasing and rewriting histories until truth became an elusive, shifting horizon. It was the reason for the vanished mission, the distorted footage, the haunting static, because what it wanted most was to remain unseen, unfathomable, untouchable. As Mira's eyes locked onto his, a chill crept down Cole's spine. The realization, sinking deep, this force was not just watching from the outside. It had been inside all along, inside his mind, inside his memories, inside the very essence of what he thought defined him. The line between self and shadow blurred until it vanished, leaving only a question that echoed in the silence between their words. Who controls whom when memory is a weapon and identity is the battlefield? The message on Cole's phone buzzed. Again, another symbol. This one more complex, a fractal pattern that seemed to shift and pulse under his gaze, inviting him to look deeper, to question harder. And beneath it, a text that chilled him to his core. You are part of the story, whether you like it or not. Watch carefully. Remember everything. The screen went black, and somewhere, far beyond the edges of his understanding, the watchers smiled. Because now the story was no longer just Cole's. It was everyone's. And the deeper truth, the one they had buried beneath layers of memory glitches and hidden footage, was still waiting, patient and cold, for the moment to reveal itself. Until then, all Cole could do was watch. And wait. Because what they don't want you to remember isn't just a secret. It's a warning. Cole sat alone in the cold glow of the screen, the fractal symbol fading slowly into darkness, but its imprint burned deep inside him, like a scar, left by a memory too sharp to forget and too painful to hold. In this room, stripped of distraction and pretense, the question that had haunted every step pressed down with unbearable weight. Why? Why had he been chosen to bear this fractured truth? What was the meaning behind the armor that rejected every alien, every invader, until it found a human? The answer was no longer just about alien threats or hidden conspiracies. It was about something profoundly human, fragile, terrifying, and infinitely complex. The mystery wasn't just about what was done to him or what he had witnessed. It was about what it revealed at the very core of existence. The struggle for identity, the desperate need to be seen and understood, and the harrowing loneliness of being utterly unknown, even to oneself. Cole's hands trembled as he reached for the worn photograph tucked in his jacket pocket, a faded image of his mother, her eyes full of quiet strength and sadness. She had whispered once long ago words he never fully grasped. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought with weapons, but with the truths we hide from ourselves. Now those words echoed in his mind with crushing clarity. The armor, the watchers, the shattered memories, they were all fragments of a war waged within. A war over the self, over what it means to be human in a world that constantly rewrites the rules of reality. And here, in this fractured moment, Cole confronted a devastating truth. The armor hadn't just found a human because of his strength or bravery. It had found a human because of his doubt, his fear, and his brokenness. He was a reflection of humanity's greatest vulnerability, the relentless uncertainty of identity, the infinite fragility of memory, and the haunting question of whether the self is ever truly whole, or just a mosaic of fragmented moments stitched together by hope. He felt the weight of every lost memory, every hidden fragment, pressing against the fragile shell of his mind. The watchers, the shadow in the corners, of his consciousness weren't enemies waiting to conquer. They were manifestations of a deeper truth, that control over memory meant control over existence, and that freedom meant something far more terrifying, the responsibility to face every broken piece of oneself, and choose to be whole anyway. Mira's face flickered in his thoughts, her words cutting through the haze. You're not just pieces on a board. You're the board itself. He saw now that the fight wasn't against an external force, but against the very forces inside. The silence that erased memories, the lies that hid pain, the parts of himself he never wanted to face. And then, a confession, raw and searing, broke free from the shadows of his mind, one he had buried beneath layers of fear and denial. I am afraid. Not just of what the Watchers are, or what the armor means, but afraid of losing who I am. Afraid that the truth, once fully known, might shatter me beyond repair. Yet beneath that fear was a spark, something fragile but fierce, a willingness to confront the abyss, to embrace the darkness and find light in its depths. This was no longer a mystery to solve, but a choice to make. To surrender to the chaos of fractured memories, or to accept the brokenness and become something new, a truth not imposed, but discovered. The armor was not just a shield. It was a mirror reflecting the most human part of him, the endless fight to be whole in an unraveling world. The screen flickered once more, and Cole's breath caught. It was no longer static or symbols, but a single phrase glowing softly in the dark. Wake up. In that moment, it wasn't the Watchers who controlled the story. It was him. The fragmented memories, the whispers, the silent observers. They were all part of a dream he had been trapped in, a dream designed to keep him from the hardest truth. That to truly awaken, he had to let go of what he thought was real and accept the terrifying, beautiful uncertainty of what comes next. And as the room faded into shadows and the fractal symbol dissolved into nothingness, Cole realized the story was not an ending. It was an awakening, a terrifying, fragile rebirth. The last thing the viewer feels is the weight of that awakening pressing deep, a quiet storm inside their chest, a breath caught between fear and hope, before the screen fades to black and the words appear. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.